Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I want to just update you. They had a little technical difficulty, so I just want to introduce the Smiths again and let you know that Matthew and Joanna are the guests, and they're going to come on, and we're going to jump in, picking up on the conversation. We missed the first couple of minutes because of some technical stuff, but they're going to be with you. They're awesome, and you're going to love this conversation. So thank you for your patience. God bless. So can you tell just like a little 5 to 10 minute story of what happened? And you say betrayal. So can y'all tell that kind of testimony and story?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything kind of came out. We call it like D-Day or
Right.
Discovery Day because I had no idea what was going on in our relationship. I just knew we kept hitting
Mm-hmm.
walls. Like we would talk about our relationship and we had the same values and same goals, but in terms of actually moving towards those, we kept getting stuck. And it was a huge revelation when we got our tea and we learned how to emotionally regulate and kind of create less chaos in terms of that. But we were still getting stuck for some reason, and I couldn't figure it out, and it was driving me crazy. And so I was actually just starting my MFT degree as in my very first class. It was a 2 week intensive called Shame and
Mm-hmm.
Guilt, which is a really fun first class. And there was an anonymous pastor who came and he gave his testimony of recovery from sex addiction, healing his marriage after betrayal. And as he was telling his story, it was just resonating with me. Like I knew there's something in what he's sharing. This is my
Mm.
experience. And so I went home that day. I shared with Matthew what I heard in my class, and then I asked him point blank, is this the thing? Is this what is keeping us stuck? Are you struggling with this?
And up until that point, it had always been no. Because she'd asked me that question in some form or fashion before we got together, while we were together. And the story was always that was in my past. It's not here
Mm-hmm.
anymore, right? That's long gone. And those were really lies. And
And that was
and and when she was telling the story,
and that
yeah,
was
go ahead.
particularly porn addiction. Is that what the reveal was, or?
Yeah, I mean, it manifested in my life in a lot of different ways, especially kind of over the course of my life. But at the time that we were together, it had really centered around porn addiction because what porn addiction allowed me to do was it allowed me to access it so secretly, right? It was so easy and fast, and it was a way that I could keep everything hidden because that's really what my sexual addiction was about, was keeping it
Mm-hmm.
hidden. And pornography was the kind of way that made that most easy and accessible. I could hide it from her easily. She could tell something would be going on. She would know I would be different, right? I would be distant. I would usually be cold, but she wouldn't know what the thing
Yeah.
was. And so I had come to a place, I think, in my own life where I was seeing how much damage it was doing. I was feeling the kind of same walls in our relationship. I could see how it was affecting her in some ways. And so a couple months before then, I can actually remember like praying and being like, God, I just, whatever the way is out, like show me the way. If you give me a path, and I think I even said those words, I was like, if you give me a path, I'll follow
Mm-hmm.
it. And she comes home and she's like, hey, this guy came to my class today and he talked about a path from sexual addiction. And she started laying out all the steps he took. And I felt like God was just like, there's your path. Do you want
Mm-hmm.
it? And the words, when she asked, are you still struggling? The words yes came out of my mouth. And I don't remember like choosing to say that. I think I just was so tired of lying, so tired of hiding. And so I said yes. And I really wasn't sure what was going to happen. I was like, yes, are we now
Right.
divorced? Like, yes, like, where does all this go? Luckily for us, it led to a journey of healing and restoration, somewhat following some of those same steps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I went all in on recovery. I realized that I did have an addiction. I was really wrapped up in this compulsive behavior that I've been doing for so long. And I knew that we had no future if it was going to stay in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And so I really focused early on kind of rooting that out. A lot of it was using some of the same things I'd learned earlier in restoration therapy. I kind of understood like, oh, I see why I go to this kind of numbing
Right.
exercise, right? I see why I'm running away. I'm running away from these core emotions. Just like I used to get angry with them, now I'm running away from them. And so that helped a lot, I think, in terms of kind of going, okay. But I think the reality is that I knew my past and some of the things that I had experienced as a kid and in my life, I really had never dealt with. I'd kind of papered over or talked about, but I knew I had to do the deep work.
Yeah. I mean, That's a great foundation. What did you guys have? What were you doing restoration therapy before that? What got you into kind of counseling that world? Because I think the average person listening, they don't have like we know each other, so we could talk about the therapy part of it a lot. But I think the average person listening, if this has happened to them, or if it does happen to them, they don't have all of that foundation. They've maybe not even thought about what they feel or think or what a pain cycle is. So, I mean, right, by God's grace, I mean, I think what I would encourage people to is that's why doing counseling and being discipled and doing shepherding is so important, is that the storm's going to come. Something's going to pop up, right? Some difficulty in your wife's life or your husband's life or your kid's life is going to surprise you. And part of doing the deep work of like understanding ourselves is accepting the grace and the mercy for our own sin, right? And our own issues and our own grief. And if we walk in that, then it's easier not to be, not that you shouldn't be hurt or offended, but that it's not an end all be all when something like this happens. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I think so much of our recovery journey is due to the fact that we had done that prior work, that we knew our pain cycle, we knew how to regulate, right? We understood why it was happening and how to get out of it. And so I think we could have had a very different story had that not been the case, had we not had access to that tool. And so we were very blessed.
And I think we were driven there because we weren't there before. I think when we first got married, we were like, we want a great marriage. And we were like, yes. And then it was like,
this is
how do
harder
you
than
do
we
that?
thought.
Right? And we just bought all the books and we just started kind of consuming resources because we didn't know how to do it. I think.
And I'll put a plug in for therapy coaching, working with a specialist, because the first group we went through is called Strong Marriages. It was a psychoeducational group and it clicked and we loved it. Insights were great. We're like, yes, we get it. This makes sense. But then living it out was a totally different story. Like, it sounds great, but it doesn't actually work. It's too hard. And so we went and actually saw a therapist who then helped us learn how to practice it, put those tools into motion. That was when the turning point happened for us.
That's so good.
And it was so significant that I was like, I'm going back and getting a master's degree.
That's awesome. Where did you go? Did you go to Fuller? Okay.
Yeah, we both did.
We started at Fuller, both doing the MDiv program. So the vision for us was to be co-pastors. That was the idea. We wanted to do something together. We wanted a shared ministry. And we did. We got our MDivs, and she had decided as we were doing that how foundational the kind of marriage and family therapy work was. And so we thought, okay, let's do this as well. Really believing that ministry was in our future in some way. And it wasn't until D-Day when all of that kind of crumbled for us, because I think part of the difficulty of that discovery was, who are we going to be as a couple? Have we lost everything we dreamed about? Are we going to just kind of get through this, but kind of give up all those dreams? And so part of rebuilding, I think, was God's gift of kind of helping us reclaim that dream. I think we have a ministry now. It's different than we thought, right? We're not co-pastors preaching on Sunday, which in some ways is kind of nice. It frees up our weekends. But we do more work with couples. We help churches, right, create ministries and do things. And so God's been incredibly good in helping us kind of refine it. But it was really difficult, and we know a lot of couples, when they have these D-Days, they're kind of in that space of, what is going to happen? Do we have a future?
I find it interesting, the variety of ways in which people react to disclosure, to finding out what, and right now, it doesn't sound like you had an affair in the sense of like cheating or anything like that. And I do think that the level of response can sometimes, be with the level of betrayal. There are levels to it, which is a whole other discussion, and we could do a podcast on that forever. But my point is that I've had clients, who, whether it's these days it's the male or the female, a lot of times it can be a woman looking at porn, it can be the man. Used to be that it was just always dudes, and then the wife was finding out. But today, man, it's crazy how those statistics have swung. And I think we'll see this as clinicians a lot more, the 15 to 20-year-olds who get in our offices in the next 5 to 10 years. It's crazy how even it is. But my point is I've seen a lot of people, like I've heard people say at dinner, well, if I caught my husband looking at porn, I'd divorce him tomorrow. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's probably why he's not telling you. Like there's a mutual relate. Like I get that, I empathize with it, but when you have that stance, especially as a believer, you have a couple things going on, right? You have no intellectual understanding of how common it is for people to struggle with these kind of things, and then you don't know how hard it is for someone to confess something around sexual sin that's so shame driven. That's not a cop out to not justifying it, but for you, man, just, denying it and denying it and denying it. I think people have a hard time if they haven't struggled with pornography or addiction in general, having the empathy to understand how that component works. And so therefore, if they've done no pre-work and they come to you guys right after, disclosure or right after the D-Day, yeah, it's like the variety of get out, we're divorced because I caught you looking at porn one time to, oh no, I totally get it. And, empathy, it's like, it's just wild, the variety, depending on how much work has been done before.
Yeah, and I think we've been amazed the amount of infidelity, betrayal that we have seen in our offices, and the resiliency of spouses who've been betrayed to stay in. I know a lot of people have that sense of, okay, I'm just going to get divorced. We're amazed, really, at the stories, and especially betrayed spouses. I think their willingness to be resilient, and part of the journey is like when we're working with a couple, we'll let them know like, the first thing you're going to have to do is kind of figure yourself out, right? You're going to have to figure yourself out as an addict or somebody who's using porn. You're going to have to figure yourself out as someone who's been betrayed, because those are both big impacts. For me, I recognize that the lying was actually preventing me from the very thing I was wanting. I was wanting to feel accepted, known, right, seen, but I was preventing that from even happening. I wasn't even giving Joanna a chance and our marriage a chance, right? And so part of what drove me into kind of sobriety and into recovery was like, I don't want this life. I don't want the life where I literally never get to be chosen. I never get to have that sense of a real relationship. And if I had not learned that about myself, I think what would have happened, and what we see a lot happen, is I would have just focused on the relationship, right? What does Joanna need? What do I got to do to fix this and make it go
That's so common.
away? Versus like, what is it that I know that I need? Because if I do that, that's what then opens me up to go, okay, what's been her experience now, right? What's been her experience on the other side of this, right? What would it have been like to be someone who didn't know what we were fighting about, right? To have all those arguments and think she knows what it's about, but not really, right? How hard that would be, right? How difficult. And I think if you get those things out of order, right, you can really, really struggle. And so like figuring out, can I know myself better?
And helping both parties in the relationship realize that there's been a trauma, right? When we treat partners, we treat it as betrayal trauma, and people's bodies and emotions react all sorts of different crazy ways when you are traumatized. And so helping them understand like those are normal reactions when you find out that for decades your husband was living a double life. Like that's traumatizing. Your entire world is falling down around you. And even partners I work with, sometimes it feels like they don't know themselves. Right. They're reacting in ways that they're not familiar with. And it can be scary. It can be terrifying to be in your body when it's responding to trauma. And so just normalizing that, helping both people, right? And then you can imagine on the other side looking at your spouse going, what is going on with you right now, right? And just normalizing, helping psychoeducate and kind of learn what trauma healing looks like.
Absolutely. Can you, you mentioned this a second ago, Matthew. I'm the same way as you. I'm astounded by the people who, in my office, or at least our offices, who have stayed together and who work through the program and who stay in treatment. And then, 2 or 3 years later, will say, I'm so glad this happened. It made our marriage so much stronger. And spouses who have been betrayed, working through EMDR, working through trauma, and then going, oh man, I had a lot of things that I was offended by or that I was doing that I wasn't aware that I was doing that contributed to, the cycle that we're in. Not that it's their fault that the person was betraying them, but through the work and through the therapy, through that suffering, they drew closer to God. Would you guys say you experienced that same thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that it's amazing, what I think we see in recovery couples is they get that you can't like half measure it, right? You can't go half in. And I
So
think
true.
when you've been in recovery, that you're like, no, it's all or nothing. And so we joke with our recovery couples. We'll say, hey, you may be around other couples sometimes, and you're gonna be frustrated at their lack of like willingness to go deep or like talk about real things. And I think what recovery does is it forces you to face those things. It forces you to face the things that you've left undone, right? I had so much in my history that I thought it'll be fine. If I can just be happy
Right.
now, all that past will go away. And my past was like, guess
Yeah.
what? No, I'm not. Like,
Tap,
I'm
tap,
hanging
tap.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And even just in terms of your own expectations for a relationship, one of the things we created for couples is this path towards healing, the intimacy pyramid, to help them understand how to rebuild
Yep.
healthy intimacy. The sneaky thing is, though, every couple needs to build in this way if they want healthy intimacy, building on honesty, safety, trust, vulnerability, and then intimacy. And so when they rebuild in the right way, they kind of what Matthew was saying, there's zero tolerance for any kind of lack of honesty anymore moving forward,
Absolutely.
right? And they catch it really fast. They don't let things go on for months or years and let the relationship crumble. They are aware of where the relationship is at. They know how to care for it well. And so they create thriving relationships that last the rest of their life.
So good. Yeah, I was going to move to that. So I love the triangle. Can you walk us through some of that and what y'all have created in that?
Yeah, it was really an attempt to try to conceptualize what do we do to get people back to what they wanted all along, right? And we started with that idea of intimacy. People want a relationship that's life-giving, that has purpose, that there's passion to it, right? And they're uninhibited and playful. And that's what everybody's after, right? It's why people come into our office, whether or not there's been betrayal. What we realized is betrayal couples, when they were coming in, it was kind of the like, what do we get out of this? What is going to be on the other side? And so as we started to identify that intimacy, we really started asking, well, what was lost, right? What's lost when betrayal really ruptures the relationship? Well, one of the first things we know is that vulnerability is gone. The realization is that I wasn't being vulnerable with Joanna the first time. She was being vulnerable with me in many ways, but I was refusing that vulnerability, right? So that piece of the puzzle, we wanted that intimacy and we kept kind of coming up to it, but we weren't getting it because that lack of vulnerability. And so we know vulnerability has to be there. But for there to be vulnerability, there needs to be trust in the relationship. You know, you don't just show up and be vulnerable just because it's the thing to do. I know everybody loves that idea of like, I'm just going to go be vulnerable. But vulnerability happens in a trusting scenario, right? In a trusting relationship.
Yeah, that's one of the.
And for the,
Yeah, I was talking to somebody this morning actually about confessing sin. And they were like, you know, I just feel so guilty. I feel like I got to tell everybody. And I'm like, no, you confess your sin to people you trust, you know. But you ultimately, you ultimately put your trust in the one who's called you to confess. But you have to be wise and smart and not just go blabbering to a bunch of people who may not be safe. That's not the point.
Right.
Yes,
Absolutely.
exactly. And trust exists when there's safety in the relationship.
And would you say reasonable safety? What I mean by that is there's so many times where I work with couples and in friendships and relationships where a person has had betrayal or they've had some trauma in their past, their nervous system is dysregulated. You know, they don't know how to self-regulate as well, or they know they need to, but they're practicing. And then they go, well, you're not safe because you messed up that one time, or you're not safe because I can't trust that you're going to be perfect. And so I try to always say reasonably safe because it feels like for our culture that what we're telling people a lot in therapy, I know you guys don't do this, but you know, the thing, especially stuff outside of RT a lot of times is like, well, no, you need to be able to guarantee your safety essentially. And so do you fall in the same category with that?
Yeah, and we define safety as the balance of two people working on the relationship. So it's about the balance, right? So it isn't about perfection,
That's great.
but it's about saying, is there a demonstrated mutual commitment to the relationship?
And it is a higher percentage than a lot of people would like to make it, right? There's actually research studies that show you need about 90% consistency to feel safe. So perfection 100%, no. But is 50% going to cut it? No. Is 75? Nope, is 85, right? I'm like, you guys are going to do a lot of hard work. You're going to be like, wow, look how far I've come. And she's still going to go, yeah, I don't feel safe. And she's going to be right because you're not consistent enough yet, but you can
That's
get
so good.
there. And what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say the same thing with temper, right? Like somebody who's losing their temper or being angry, if you can trust that that's only going to happen 1 out of 10 times, then you're reasonably safe. But if 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, God forbid, like you're just waiting on the hammer to drop. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that I tell people all the time, you don't have to be perfect, but we can do a lot better than 3 out of 10 times.
Right. And then what are you doing with that 10% where you're failing, right? Are you going, well, I'm allowed to fail 10%? Are you, right? Are you
So
getting
good.
Are you getting justification? Are you going, no, that I'm still taking that seriously. It's not okay. I want to root that out of my life and out of our relationship. And here's what I'm going to do.
So
to do
so
that,
good.
right? Is there responsibility taken?
So vulnerability, then
And then
trust.
Yeah. So kind of trust, vulnerability, intimacy. Under trust is safety, and under safety is the foundation of honesty. And what we realized is that once honesty breaks down in the relationship, that's when everything else starts to break down. And honesty is really about a willingness to be transparent. It's a willingness to kind of know myself so I can share that with you. And so some people aren't honest because they don't know themselves. They're not aware. And so they don't realize what's going on with themselves, and so they show up right in this weird way. And we've all had that friend, right, where you're like, "Are you okay?" And they're like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And you're like, "I know
Right.
you're not fine. Like, I know, right?" And you get that sense of you're not being real with me, right? You're not being authentic because you don't know yourself. And so what we've tried to do is just kind of work with a couple to say, let's start at this foundation of honesty, right? Let's learn to be honest. Let's learn to build back, right? This equal working together in safety, right? So that we can build a trusting relationship, because as that trust is reestablished, that's when we get to lean into the deeper work of vulnerability and the joyful work of intimacy.
Right. So for people listening, it's a triangle, more like the Maslow's hierarchy of need triangle, where it stacks onto itself to get to the point, more than 2 points that meet in the middle.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I saw something the other day that was good. It was just talking about husbands and wives, and that Christ is the tip of the triangle, and they're at the corners. And the closer you move toward, the more you move towards Christ, the closer you are together. And it's old, but it was just a good resonating in the same way of just like, we're all moving towards something together, which is what I love about usness and restoration therapy and all that stuff pairs so well. So Matthew, you're a coach, right? Or
we both actually work as coaches predominantly now, just because of our kind of location. Joanna still has some kind of therapy clients that she sees, but we work mainly in that coaching.
And you guys work together? Like, how does that work? You see the couple as a couple?
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is what's really interesting with the intimacy pyramid and with recovery work especially, oftentimes really early on in the process, individual work is needed. So when a couple comes to us and let's say they just had their D-Day and they're like, hey, he came home and confessed, or I found something on his phone, or like I'm seeing these kind of weird messages and I know something's up. What we usually will say is when they come to us, we're like, we're working on the relationship, but to do that, we've got to address what's happened to you individually. Right. And so a lot of that early work, even in honesty, is very individualized, right? Can I show up as an honest person, transparent? And so I'm working with a husband, Joanna's working with a wife, and we're working on the relationship as we do that work. And so one of the things that's often the case is we will invite someone who's spent a lifetime of lying to kind of have this right of truth, right? This right of honesty. It's called a full disclosure. And it's where I stopped living behind the curtains, right? Letting you see bits and pieces. I now come out and say, this is it, right? This is the full me. And I know it. And now you get to know it, and we get to make kind of relational decisions out of that. So that's one of the examples of kind of how it works, where we're working with a couple, but working still kind of independently.
Yes. And then we'll sometimes all come together, do conjoint sessions, talk about where they're at. And then as they move up that pyramid, they'll start to shift into more couples work. And sometimes we'll be meeting with them all together as a couple, or they'll shift just kind of solely into that couple space.
That's awesome. So then if you have a couple who's worked through that, or you guys are meeting at the same time, you two and them?
Yeah, often one of the coolest things we do is when they've kind of gotten into that trust phase, we started realizing that there was less a need for kind of like weekly private support,
Yeah.
because one of the things we know about couples counseling is after a while it's like let's show up and talk about our problem, right? And then go back and talk about our problem. And so we wanted something a little different. And a couple of years ago, we developed a group program where we took betrayal couples and we put them all in a group together and we had them kind of work through the intimacy pyramid together. And the idea came from our own experience, which was one of the difficulties in betrayal is that it's very isolating. It's really hard to talk
You're not
to.
going to show up in your Friday small group and they're like, so how's your week? What are you struggling with? They're like, oh, well, how much time do we have, right? That just doesn't always feel very safe.
And those couples can stay isolated. They kind of stay in this kind of cocoon of recovery and they find themselves really alone. And Joanna and I went through that personally. It was like we needed couples who got it, right? We had good friends that we loved, but we really needed couples who got it. And in our own journey, we begged two couples. They knew our tea, right? And they were our friends in San Diego. And we were like, would you please do a couples group with us around betrayal? And they both were like, no. And we kept asking, right?
That's a terrible
I think
idea.
the husbands were like, hell no.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And we kept asking, and finally they were like, okay, let's do it. And we did this like 12-week study. It was amazing, right? We called it Marriage 2.0. And by the end of it, we were all like, oh, we needed this. Because we had a shared language, we had shared experiences. And so we've created that for couples who are going through this process because there is a need for that kind of community.
And really this ability to push more into their usness because that recovery is so siloed and so individual, right? It's going like, no, how do we start to exist in our usness and embrace the fullness of our story and what we've been through? And so it gives them a safe space to start to do that.
That's so awesome. All right, so question. Are y'all, I can't remember, you guys are CSATs or no?
No, so I am a CPTT. It's the kind of betrayal trauma side of ITAP.
Okay, but you went through ITAP to get that? Yeah.
Yes.
And you're, as a coach, Matthew, your own personal experience and your own testimony and the work you've done, that's kind of the primary bread and butter of that. Yeah, I find it interesting. I love that we're meeting and doing the RT, dialogue around sex addiction and porn addiction and these kind of things. I think it's very, very much needed. And I love CSAT in a lot of ways, but I love the work that you guys are doing, and I just want to thank you for it because as Christians, there's just such a different lens that we can take on some of this stuff. And I find that, the statistics don't bear out in my office. Like, and what it sounds like is they don't bear out in your office either. Is that, a lot of people hear these stories and, oh, my husband or my wife got caught in adultery or pornography or, something like that. And we have like a 12% chance of making it. And man, I just want to encourage people that that's not the case. I know my statistics, and it sounds like y'all's are much higher than that if people stay in doing the work. Would you say that's the same?
Oh my gosh, 100%. And we have couples who have stories that if you read it on paper, you would say there's absolutely no way they are going to survive,
Or that they're
right?
happy.
Or that they're like really excited about their relationship on the other side. And some of the biggest, heaviest disclosures we've had are currently the happiest, most thriving couples we know. Yep. And so your story does not dictate your future in any way.
It's so good. I just think we can't say that enough because a lot of times I think we're just doom and gloom in the culture of how bad this stuff is. And look, that doesn't minimize how painful it is, right? Like for the partner and for the, for me, it's working with the addict on either side who has hidden these things for so many years as a form of coping. One of the things in my book that I wrote about is the off-ramp, and talking about the idea of when was there an off-ramp to really be honest in your brain, and that doesn't minimize the lie. But Matthew, you can maybe speak to this a little bit. For men that are out there, women that are out there who their experience with sexuality has always been negative, or their first experience of pornography or masturbation or sexual, just sexual development was met with shame and disgust from a parent and a caregiver or the church, to then expect them in a relationship to be able to be honest, right, is, I think, sometimes easier said than done. Well, most of the time easier said than done. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I've learned, I think, in recovery to hold my past with both compassion and accountability.
So good.
Right? I can see very much where I was exposed early as a kid to sexualized content that I was not ready developmentally to see. There was no education around that exposure. Much of the society in the 80s was about, right, sex and this, kind of Hollywood version of it. And that was what I began to understand. I also grew up in a parental relationship where there was lies. My dad would regularly tell me, "Don't tell your mom I bought this," right? "Don't tell this to your mom," right? And these were these messages. And so I can see compassionately where I was trained to run to sex to feel better and to hide that behavior from anyone I thought would mean vulnerability to me. I can also, though, in accountability, see I let myself
Yep.
fall into that lie for so long. I think what I love RT teaches us is about the lie, right? It's this lie versus this truth. The lie that I would be alone if people knew me, right, was the lie that kept me hidden. And it was what did the most damage. And I'm so thankful that God continually showed me, no, come out, right? Bring it into the light, share with people, and you will have the kind of freedom, the kind of connection you've always dreamed of. And so it is that balance, right? It's that recognition of like, I see it, I see how I got here. I have no desire to go back because of what it keeps from me. I think this idea, Joanna said this people have this idea with recovery that it's the wall, right? Recovery is the wall from addiction versus addiction is the wall from the good life of recovery.
That's so good.
Right? Like recovery is the good life. Like it's the life we want to live, and addiction is keeping us from
That's
that,
so good.
right? And so that's what helps me really embrace this kind of new way of living, even as it's still like a challenge to, okay, these are old habits, right? I've gotta stop them in the middle, shut it down, right, and move to the place that I really want to be.
That's so good. Yeah, I would challenge people on that same premise. Like, I loved what you said there, just being compassionate with yourself and having accountability. And I think accountability to me, when I work with clients and people, it's taking an account of your ability, right? Like so many times accountability in the church, especially, and even with therapists, is like behavior modification. It's, I'm going to keep you from doing this thing and I'm going to check on if you did or didn't do the thing, versus reminding you of who you are in Christ. And that if you really believe the gospel, that these behaviors that we're changing, whether it's being in recovery is the good life. It's following Jesus, not sinless, not perfectly, because we can't do that, but also not striving for that, right? Getting up every day and going, I'm going to be perfect like my Father in heaven is perfect. And when I'm not, I'm going to be thankful for the gospel and the good news. And when we do our own work, like you were saying earlier, when we do our own work and take our own responsibility for our own sin, then the outpouring of that is grace and mercy for our partner, for our kids, for other people. And we're able to forgive and feel safe, not because the other person is God, but because we have a God that's promised good things for us, which goes back to that kind of, if you don't know that as a kid, if you don't know that as a young adult, if you don't know that as a person right now listening, then you are going to hide. We want to, there's this meme that I love. It's a guy, he's got camouflage pants on. He's crossing the street and he's got camouflage like BDU pants on, like military pants on, but he's got like a yellow, like crossing guard jacket. And the meme's like, bro, do you want to be seen or do you want to hide? And it's like, it's so many of us, myself included. It's like, that's how we are, and I posted it a couple years ago because it was just like, this is trauma. Like, it's like, please see me, but also I have camouflage on. And I find myself telling people and myself, we want to be known, but what happens in a situation with people when they're not regularly confessing sin, when they're not repenting, when they're not being honest and transparent and sharing these vulnerable pieces, is they leave relationships, whether it's a church group or a friendship or a marriage or a family, thinking if they really knew this thing, they would abandon me. They wouldn't love me. And then the next meeting, it's like, well, I'm not going to say that again because I want this thing. But then they can never really enjoy it because they know or they think that if they shared those things, they would. And that's not love. Love is seeing somebody and knowing all their mess and loving them anyway. And when you experience that type of love from a partner or a friend or, a family, then we feel fully known because we're like, oh man, they know me and they love me still. But I'm not saying that's easy.
And that's why it's helpful to have someone you see to go, all right, how do we get there again?
Yeah,
Right?
how do we learn how to do that?
That's why we get to do what we do. I mean, we get to meet with couples who say, I want that, right? I want to be able to look at my partner with love, right? With compassion. I'm struggling with that, right? And what's wonderful is God has done a thing in our life and put, I think, a heart and desire to know, right? To understand why that happens, and then to walk alongside people.
I think being ready to hold the reality of the impact that you have caused by the choices, right? It's not, okay, I finally lay it all out there and everyone's going to shower me with a bunch of love and hugs, right? And that's the expectation too, right? But to be able to go, and I'm willing to sit and cry and grieve for months and sometimes years over the damage and the pain that I have caused because of those decisions. That's vulnerability right there. That's humility right there.
Yeah, my wife and I were talking last week, and we've been married 16 years this December. And we've been through the pornography and those kind of things as well. And it's interesting, like that stuff becomes so second note to the things that are really underneath there. And obviously that's just a symptom of the problem, of the pain problem. But we were talking the other day and just saying, it's so crazy. One of the things I don't feel like people talk enough about is how we hurt each other in ways in the beginning of marriage, especially people who don't know what they're doing, don't know their pain, don't know what they're bringing into marriage, which is most people. We get into marriage and we think our way of doing things is the right way, and we think all my intentions are good. I just want to have a good marriage and a happy life and good sex and all those things. And we're hurting each other, but because the other person doesn't even know what their pain points are, they don't even know they're being hurt, or if they're hurt, they don't know how they're being hurt. So then we're 10 years in unpacking something, and you're having to apologize like 14, 15 years later, 20 years later, and go, hey, I recognize now after all of these years, knowing what I know now, and I'm so sorry for the ways that I hurt you early on when I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
And I think we just have to keep doing that. You know what I mean? And we're going to have to keep doing that. And, but what we want to do is go, but I didn't mean to, or I didn't know I was doing it. And so therefore, right. And it's like, I want to be like, why are you mad about that? Like, I didn't even know I was doing the thing that I was doing. I can't be held accountable for what I didn't know. And it's like, that's not real humility. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's also not real connection. And I think what we learned, and it's hard to stay in this space, but what we've learned is connecting on our shared grief, right? Going, I hate that, right? I hate that that's where I was and caused this injury on you. Like, that's actually a connecting experience, right?
In the present. It's like currently helping our relationship be stronger.
And so it's this thing we're all scared of, but it's also this thing that's keeping us from the kind of connections that we want.
Couples get real terrified when I tell them, okay, you'll know you're in a really good, healthy place when you can talk about your past easily and all the time. They're like, no. I thought getting through this meant we never speak of it again. And I'm like, nope, it's the opposite.
True. That's so true. That's such a cultural thing, man, especially the church. It's like, we're so uncomfortable with people's pain. In our own pain and all those kind of things. And you're so right. That's such a good point, Joanna. I mean, people do go, we're getting recovery so we can recover and not have to ever talk about my porn use again, or, the ways in which I, withheld, or it's like, no, you can talk about them without that sending you to a 10 and without you shaming yourself and feeling like, a pile of trash. It's another good sign for people listening. If you find that, you can't talk about something, then you need to talk about something with somebody who's safe.
That's what you need to talk about.
Absolutely. Any thoughts from you guys? Any kind of closing questions or comments, or just what you'd like people to know? I think for me as a clinician, sometimes I'm like, I just wish everybody knew this. Is there anything that's kind of the last couple months y'all been wrestling with or talking through that's you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think we always want to remind people it does work. Like the things work, right? We've seen it in our own life. We've seen it in the lives of other couples. Like one of the greatest joys we get is some of the couples that we've helped along the way, they're now helping other
Yes.
couples, right? They're in this mode of coaching and supporting and running groups. And it is just like, it feels like having grandbabies. Like we're like, oh, the legacy of the work God did in us. Like one pastor's testimony changed our life, right? Our willingness to kind of be honest with people and to work through what we went through has helped us change other people. And if you're at that place where you're either like before D-Day and you're wondering like, is there any way through this, or D-Day just happened? I think just being reminded like God will not abandon you. He will be with you, and there is a way through it is greener pastures, right? It is a place that you will like being.
And that you're not alone in that there are people out there who understand, who have been through it, and who also know the journey and know how to help other people on the journey. I'd say kind of reach out, get connected to people who understand what you're going through can be a great help and support.
That's so awesome. One quick story, and then I'll let you guys go. But I do a sex addiction group on Thursday. There's like 10 guys in there. And, I generally talk about restoration therapy, but we typically stay on like the 3-circle exercise where you come in, you kind of, hey, where's your green stuff? Where's your red stuff? Where's your yellow stuff? And one of the guys was using RT language. And I was like, well, have you been listening to podcasts? Like, what do you, he's like, well, I'm seeing somebody online and they live, I don't remember where he said they lived. But I was like, oh, yeah, they do restoration therapy. He's like, yeah, all this stuff you've been talking about, they talk about it in their sessions. I was like, great. And so I asked him who it was, and it was somebody, I guess, underneath you guys. Y'all have a couple other therapists that work for you guys? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't remember the lady's name, but he was like, oh, she's this. And I was like, oh, I know them. I was like, they're going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks. And, we've connected and, and so it was just a cool, just a small world, but also just an encouragement to you guys. My dream is for when I work with couples that they would go and do what you guys are doing. And I know that's the same for you guys. It's like, we don't just get changed by the gospel so we're okay and happy. We get changed by it so that we can then be the light in the darkness for other people. And so as a fellow, person who's doing this work, like as a couple getting to see you guys do it, it's just super cool. And then knowing that it's impacting people in Louisiana, and all over the country, that the ministry and the faithfulness that you guys have had to Christ and the faithfulness that he's had to you is super cool. Yeah. So I'm just super thankful for the work you're doing, the stuff you're writing, the work we're getting to do together and figuring this stuff out. And then the last thing is just like, it's so weird talking to you guys too, because it's when you talked about like being grandparents. I'm 42. So how old are you guys?
46.
39.
That's right. So it's crazy that we're in this age where we're considered the old people, for a lot of these young couples who are in church and who are 19 and 20 and 25. And so, I would just encourage people our age and older not to give up on shepherding people and mentoring people. And that if you're a wife or a husband or a pastor, listen to this, bring some people in, teach them about marriage, have them at your house for dinner, ask hard questions. Like I could have benefited from that so much in my early 20s without having to burn the whole thing down and repair it. So I don't know if you guys feel like that. Like sometimes I feel 12 and sometimes I feel 90 at the same time,
100%. Yeah. One church we worked at or volunteered at, we helped lead the premarital class curriculum, and we got to teach RT to all the pre-married couples. Awesome. And so we got to dive in deep and give them tools and have those conversations. And so, yeah, I think that's so important to pour into the kids who are growing up, hopefully more equipped than we were for relationships.
I'm always like, I'm 25, and then I hang out with a 25-year-old, and I'm like, never mind. Especially if I try to play basketball, my knees tell me I'm definitely not 25 anymore. Well, look, guys, this has been super awesome to have you guys on. I know it's going to be very encouraging to my listeners, and I just hope that people know there's hope, and you guys exude that in your personalities and in the work you're doing and in what you're writing, and so I'm just thankful that you gave me the time to let you guys shine a little bit.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, if you want to find them, can you give them y'all have a website and all that stuff? Can y'all give that?
Absolutely. The easiest way to find us is raabsmithteam.com. We also do some free resources. We like to equip people out there, so you can go to raabsmithteam.com/free. Give us an email. You get a free resource. It'll walk you through kind of how to connect better with your partner on a daily basis. And on that site, we kind of update everybody on all the different things we do, how to work with us, all this stuff.
Yeah, and you guys do online stuff, is right? Yeah.
We do.
Yes,
we see people all around the world.
That's
so
awesome.
If you're on Earth, you can look at
Yeah.
That's so good. Yeah, and seriously, y'all, whoever's listening to this, that trust me, like these two guys are amazing, and you can trust them. You can go see them. I would love for our people to be able to do that, especially if we can't meet your needs. Please do. Please get in and get some help, because we're all trying to recover together. So God bless you guys. Have a good week.